Coke, please.
Oh, my gosh.
My mashed taters and gravy.
Is that what?
Just changing.
Good evening. Welcome to the regular Piqua City Commission meeting, Tuesday, June 1st, 2021. Let's begin by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Commissioner Hines.
Here.
Commissioner Grissom.
Here.
Mayor Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Pearson. Here. Commissioner Foat.
Here.
Next on our agenda is the consent agenda.
Mayor, we have 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. We have approval of the minutes from the May 18th, 2021 regular Piqua City Commission meeting and the May 20th, 2021 Piqua City Commission work session. We have resolution number R-48-21, a resolution appointing April Dankworth, a member to the Tree Committee. Resolution number R-49-21, a resolution appointing Matthew Bolin, a member to the Tree Committee.
Any questions from the commission? If there are no questions, I will ask.
I'll make a motion to approve the
motion.
consent agenda.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is old business.
So we have resolution number R-92-20, a resolution reestablishing a committee on community diversity and adopting the committee's mission and responsibilities.
All right. I hope everybody's had a chance to read through that. And all we're doing is reestablishing the committee. In 2015, I believe, it went down with no business, and also the naming rights aspects to it went away. I'd like to reinstitute both of those things and have an agenda for the Committee on Diversity. First, working on health-related issues so that we can establish some parameters and some baseline figures on health standards for diverse communities. Next, I think we need to have a community discussion on race. And I'm going to task the Committee on Diversity to come up with a community-wide discussion that's open to the public about race in Piqua, Ohio, and get people's opinions on that. A third thing that I'd like them to do is to focus on making historical items important of all sorts, but of a diverse nature as well. Increase the importance to the citizens. If we can do that, we can focus on the Randolph Testament that Mr. Hamilton's done, some other things that have gone on through our committee. I found out yesterday at the Veterans Day or Memorial Day speech that there were 222 African Americans that joined in the Civil War and that are buried at our cemetery. You know, we don't know about that. I wanted the committee to work on that. And a final thing that I would like them to work on, and all of which will be, once we reinstitute the committee, will be given to them as an agenda, is for them to look at systemic racism and have them do it not just, I mean, I would like the city to participate in that, but department heads and city employees participate in that as well, so that they can see. So those are the things that I'm looking at in the agenda that I would like for them to be tasked with. If anybody else has anything, feel free to jump on. And any comments about reinstituting the committee, now is the time.
Mayor Lee, I just want to say I commend you on your leadership, and it is time to do this, and it is a shame that we have not had this committee over the past few years that we have. And I think it's time, and
Yeah, it's
especially to
time.
look at systemic racism, not only here within
Yes.
the city building, but also within our entire city as well.
Yep.
So I wholeheartedly affirm that, so thank you very much.
That's right. So one of the things we need to get members. Everybody is free to apply, and just like any of the boards that we have, I would love for people to apply so we can get this going as soon as possible. So, any other comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I got a comment to make about it. At the very beginning, I think at the latter part of last year, during the COVID pandemic, is when the city brought this up to identify, these systemic race issues. So I'm going to tag on to what Commissioner Hines said, looking at these systemic issues citywide is one of the things, but the first step was getting this committee back in place, now identifying the systemic issues, collecting substantiating data, and then putting plans in place. So I think the city's now on track for what we originally talked about a little bit, just about a year ago. So, my hat is off to you, Mayor, and continue to march on with this, and I'll be here to support it 100%.
Sounds good.
You looking at making any differences to the committee or bringing it back as it was?
Bring it back as it was. 7 members would be perfect. Perfect number. Any questions from the citizens?
Larry Hamilton, 1104 Maplewood Drive, Piqua. And I too would like to commend the City Commission and the leadership of Mayor Lee in this regard. There are some points of clarification that I would like to have established. First of all, in connection with the repeal of the resolution of the naming rights proclamation. When exactly did that occur?
Sometime in 2015.
Okay, I'd like,
A date?
a specific date, and I want to see.
Can we find
you
that
know,
date?
When
We
that
found it
was
the
and
last
how
time I had it.
that was issued and came about, because I'm interested in that. That's a part of what should
was-
be the mandate of the new diversity committee. And so that's something that needs to be established.
Sure.
I appreciate the interest in having the city and city head departments being directly responsible for some level of coordination in connection with resolutions in regards to racism. So that's very, very important. And the fact that you have a diversity committee won't matter much if you don't have its charge and mandate and some enforcement mechanism associated with its powers.
Sure.
So I thank you. We're heading in the right direction, and let's move on.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments.
Mr. Hamilton, it was in 2015, I cannot find the date right now, but it was somewhere around the spring of 2015, before any of us were on the commission, so,
April 7th,
thank you.
looking at it.
April 7th, 2015.
Any other comments from the citizens? Any other comments from the commission? Then I will take a motion unless, we have to have 3 readings? It's a resolution.
I make a motion, we approve resolution number R-92-20.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All right, so the naming rights are back on. The Committee on Diversity is back active, and anybody interested in the community, please submit your application so that we can get you on the committee. So, and it does have to have some teeth, and it has to have a mandate. I totally agree with that with Mr. Hamilton, so. All righty, next on the agenda is new business.
Okay, first up, we have resolution number R 25-50-21. Chris Smeezing, Community and Economic Development Director, will be presenting the next three staff reports. With regard to this resolution, it's a resolution approving the Community Development Block Grant Community Development Allocation Program application for program year 2021 and authorizing the city manager to submit the application to the Ohio Development Services Agency Office of Community Development.
Thank you. So every 2 years, the city becomes eligible for development block grant funds, which are administered through the Ohio Development Services Agency. We're coming up on that 2-year cycle. What you have before you this evening is a request to be authorized to submit for receipt of those funds. So it's an allocation. The state determines the allocation amount based upon your community size and eligibility requirements that they set forward. Piqua typically receives around $150,000. That's what we would expect to receive in this cycle. Those funds are generally used for activities that are in neighborhoods that meet the slum and blight definition, which basically is measuring household income levels and such. And this current cycle, the 2019 cycle, we're using those funds for activities such as demolition of distressed housing structures and commercial structures. So sometimes it's used for things such as sidewalk improvements or street improvements or parking facilities, improving public infrastructure to alleviate flooding conditions, things of that variety. And so it can be used for a number of items. Once we receive authorization from commission, then we submit to the state and request that we receive our allocation. And during the course of that conversation, then we go through the prioritization list that's maintained through the public hearings that are conducted every other year and evaluate the list of projects against the city's CIP and what priorities we have for projects that need to be done and determine if they're in a suitable location, if the neighborhood is eligible, and then that's how we figure out how those funds should be used. Questions? So again, this is just to authorize us to request to the state that we receive our allocation in this upcoming cycle.
You say this is a yearly grant?
Every other year.
Every other year? Have we received it pretty regularly?
Yeah, I won't say it's an automatic thing, but we receive an allocation. There's an allocation set aside for our community every other year. And basically all we have to do is ask for it, and through that process then present projects that meet the eligibility criteria, and we typically receive those funds.
And then after receiving those, we'll decide on prioritizing and put it part of the CIP as well, too?
Through the process of securing the funds, we identify the projects that they'll be used for. So like last year, it was, it's what we're doing now, or 2 years ago. We're spending those dollars now, and you'll see demolition activity this summer on the church at Boone and Broadway, for example. Properties that are distressed and typically walkaways, and there's no other resources available to be able to affect the activity that needs to happen there. Those are usually good candidates for the CDBG funds.
Well, and citizens will be happy to hear that the church is on the list, because we all receive a lot of calls about that, so.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions from citizens?
Larry Hamilton, 1104 Maplewood Drive. Chris, I'm curious, I don't know the history of the authorization of community development block grants, but I'm curious as to whether or not there are directives associated with equity, civil rights kinds of efforts that promote equity.
So through the program and through the state or the federal department that administers the programs and then distributes the funds down to the state level, there are national objectives that are established. I can't speak to specifically if there's anything in there about social equity issues, but there are typically broad and far-reaching goals that are aimed towards primarily addressing conditions that are in neighborhoods that are underserved because of distress of a variety of natures. So that could very well be that what you're speaking to is described in one of those objectives. I just don't have the specific language right in front of me.
Are there specific kinds of outreach goals into various neighborhoods within the community that
There are certain types of projects that they would view as eligible and others that they're not interested in. It's not programming dollars, it's for physical outcomes in terms of public infrastructure, demolition of distressed properties, parking lot improvements are pretty common, sidewalk repairs. And again, these are in neighborhoods that are underserved or have household median incomes where it's problematic for these improvements to be made on their own. Or maybe public dollars aren't being spent there for other reasons. So these dollars are dedicated to those neighborhoods or to those types of locations.
Do we have the guidelines for receiving those funds posted somewhere?
I can certainly get a copy, yeah.
There's your guy. Check him out.
And if I'm correct, the CDBG grants, they're very wide in a variety of ways that they do it. And for example, didn't we receive one downtown for some of the awning and the facade projects for some of our downtown businesses? Wasn't that part of, it's a whole different, I mean, it's a huge pot, but there are different ones that are specific for different things.
There are, I think, a half a dozen or more different funding tracks or pots of money, programs. Each of those programs have different focus areas. And so the downtown facade grant program that you referred to was part of it was a competitive program. So unlike this, that's where you're submitting to them and saying, we want to do a downtown facade improvement program. And you're competing against all the other communities in the state who also have requested monies from that pot of funds. And sometimes you secure those monies and you're able to run the program, other times you don't. This is your every other year allocation.
Right.
And even then, it's got certain parameters tied to it in terms of what it can and can't be used for.
Well, and I just wanted our citizens to understand that, because I know that for our small businesses downtown, that was a huge help for many of them to get some of the facade and some of those things done with this grant funding that they may not have been able to do. So that whole CDBG has a variety of ways that it really supports our community and our citizens, so. With sidewalks, like this one could be for sidewalks and things like that, so,
Correct.
yeah.
Any other questions from citizens? Any questions from the commissioners? I'll entertain a motion then.
Go.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number R-50-21.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next.
Resolution number R-51-21, a resolution authorizing the sale of city-owned real estate.
This item pertains to the property located at 123 North Main Street. It's the former Pickle Granite operation. I shouldn't say former. The business is planning to close soon, and in preparing for their being able to convey the property through a sales transaction, they want to remedy the issue that they have with the improvements encroaching upon former canal land, which is the city of Pickwa holds the deed to the canal land. So this item, like several others that we've addressed here recently, would authorize the city to convey the subject canal area to the adjoining property for the sake of eliminating the encroachment condition with regards to the improvements on the subject property that encroach onto the canal. And then it would, there'd be no cloud on the title, so that the property owner would be able to convey it fee simple without any issues. And this, as commission's aware, this is a project that's supporting or in concert with the downtown riverfront revitalization efforts. there is the property's under contract with a developer who intends to do some things with the property that will align with what the placemaking vision had identified as appropriate for this location. The end user is not quite ready to make a public announcement, so I'm going to hold back just a little bit there. But it is a use and activity that fits with zoning. It conforms with our zoning code. It aligns with the placemaking document. And it's consistent with our comp plan and our riverfront redevelopment strategy.
Any questions from the commission? I don't have a problem with this, but I know there are other places to the north of town that have canal property that would like to develop as well. So, and we can treat them all the same, like we did with the Winans property and this property and.
Yeah, these items typically come before you when there's a sales transaction or something that triggers the conversation.
All right.
I have an email in my inbox that I need to respond to, which I think is what you're referencing.
I knew you knew what I was talking about. Pull the trigger. Any questions from the citizens? All right, I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number R-51-21.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, and last but not least, resolution number R5221, a resolution authorizing the sale of city-owned real estate.
Here again, this is to remedy an existing encroachment condition related to the former Miami-Area Canal alignment that the city of Piqua now holds the deed to. This one's a little bit different in that the property owner in this case had previously granted an easement to the city across a portion of property that he holds title to allow for the bicycle path improvements some years ago. And as part of the discussion at that time, it was understood that should the city gain control of the canal right-of-way, we would work with him to convey the property that his improvements encroach on. So that's the item that you have before you this evening. This would honor that original agreement and initiate the process of authorizing us to be able to convey that land to this property owner.
Any questions from the commission?
You know, I just have to say, if you didn't know that was back there, you wouldn't know it was back there.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
that's true.
hidden back there, whether
is
you're
hidden.
on this side or you're on the bike path, you know, so.
It is
It's a
hidden.
nice piece of property.
Yep. Any questions from the citizens? I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution R-52-21.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I guess now we are on to public comment. And this is an opportunity for citizens to address the city commission regarding agenda items, issues, or to provide information. Comments are requested to be limited to 5 minutes, and specific questions should be addressed to the city manager's office. Anyone from any citizen would like to come forward?
Good evening once again.
Yes, sir.
I'm Larry Hamilton, 1104 Maplewood Drive. My public announcement is, yes, we are finally open.
Yes, I love it.
And it's been a 4-year effort, but God is good, and we have been able to persevere and can offer the community a unique and distinguished coffee shop that is unparalleled anywhere. I believe that is the case with the North Star Coffee Station that is under the management of Cecil Ching and Damon Wilson. The North Star Coffee Station is a part of an Underground Railroad theme or motif that extends ownership identity to Frederick Douglass. So we urge citizens to come and check it out and patronize the North Star Coffee Station.
I've been there, and I can attest that the coffee is excellent. It's
And
very good. And I've sent as many people as I can think of to there, so that you'll start seeing some business, I'm sure. And my wife particularly is interested. She's a coffee snob, so she'll probably be going straight to you as long as no, she tasted. I brought it home. She tasted it. She thought it was great, and she has to have the cream and sugar like you said you did. But she tasted it without, because I like it without cream and sugar, and it was a great taste. So
What are the hours?
well, it opens at 5:45 in the morning.
wow.
And if there's a constant flow, it's likely to remain open until 6 p.m.
Okay.
But if there is an ebb and flow, they may opt to close earlier.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
But again, for the clarification, Linda Hamilton and I are the owners of the Randolph and McCulloch Freedom Struggle Complex. The owners and managers of the North Star Coffee Station are in tune or in line with our vision and are leasing out of that complex. So that's a point of clarification. Yesterday, we celebrated Memorial Day.
Yes, sir.
And a part of the goal or responsibility that I took in developing the Randolph and McCulloch Freedom Struggle Complex was because of the need for an inclusive historical heritage. And I want to share with the community and the Piqua City Commission the fact that the original concept of a Memorial Day was developed by a black church group in Charleston, South Carolina, May 1st, 1865. So these are little-known facts that aren't taught on a regular and consistent basis, and that's something that we want to offer as a complement or supplement to the historical education that is, of course, offered at our local level. So keep that in mind. Also, I'd like to recognize the fact that today is the anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre.
It is.
And that is something that people, again, don't know much about because it was officially blocked in terms of offering as education to students in Oklahoma by local and state authorities. And so for years and years and years, there was no knowledge of the fact that this was one of the worst race massacres to be initiated within the United States. It was obviously a an act of domestic terrorism. And it wasn't known until the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City, because people were thinking that that was the worst situation of domestic terrorism. And there were people within the African American community who shook their heads and said, no, no, no.
This is the worst.
That the Tulsa race riot took over 300 some lives. And
you
there's
did hear today.
there's an undetermined, actually, number of people who have been alleged to have been killed in that
Here
incident.
they were digging for the bodies today.
They are. So there are a lot of issues that we have to resolve within our society, and we have to find collaborative means to address those issues. But in closing, I would also like to share with you that even though the origination of the May 1st, 1865 Memorial Day took place in Charleston, South Carolina, thereafter, that was referred to as Decoration Day. It wasn't referred to as Memorial Day. And I have a distant cousin who attended Berea College. Berea was like the Oberlin of of Kentucky. And he was the author of a book called Footprints. And the first page in Footprints is a poem titled 30 Years of Peace, and I'd like to share that to you before I take my seat.
Sure.
This was recited at Berea College Decoration Day, 1893. Henry Allen Lane came after my great-grandmother, his cousin, who attended Berea in 1888, becoming the first teacher in the Hamilton family. Excuse me. Time rapid rolls to many here. It seems but yesterday, since horrid wars grim crash and roar, the very mountains sway. When sunny south with scattered wreck was strewn from shore to shore, and blackened chimneys marked the sites where cities stood before. When Negro slaves by Christian men were landed on our shore, peace fled and base contentions rose, increasing more and more. Like subterranean fires that for years unheeded burn, when suddenly in wrath burst forth and mountains overturn. So the fierce fires of smothered hate grew more and more intense until the South rose up in arms to fight for the defense of that the greatest of all sins. As time rolls on and I look back and see what has been done in 30 years to reunite and make one people one, my heart in gratitude goes out as I look round and see where once the vilest hatred reigned, now peace and harmony. All honor to our unborn dead who fell amid the fray, whose bodies lie beneath some plain or hillside far away. On bloody fields they face no more the blazing cannon's mouth, but from their ranks celestial watch the progress of the South. O'er 45 progressive states these honored colors wave, the North and South united firm and not a single slave. The slaver's whip, the clanking chain, have long since passed away. And white or black, no matter now, a man's a man today. I think Cousin Henry Allen Lane might be dismayed and disillusioned about the level of our progress in our society. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. Next.
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that, but J. Roman, 406 West High. So I got two things here tonight. First and foremost, I want to let everybody know next Saturday, downtown at the gazebo, was the Be the Change voter drive.
12th.
Yeah, June 12th. June 12th. Yep, yes, sir. We're going to start around 1 o'clock. We'll be there about noon setting up. It's going to be a really good time. We've got a lot of cool raffle items that are out there. Scott Family McDonald's actually donated this huge pack. It's got a Roku in it. It's got they hooked us up pretty good. And this raffle is 100% free to the public. All you got to do is come down, hang out. No purchase necessary. It's going to be a good time. We're going to have a cornhole tournament. Maybe some cash prizes involved, just in case we have enough teams that want to get involved. We're looking at about $150. It's going to be a good time. And not only that, we're going to get some people registered to vote. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I've been reminded, I haven't been here for the last month, and the last month I've been reminded why we do things like this, like the Be the Change voter drive, and we get this community involved. When I first moved here back in 2016, I felt connected to this place, and I couldn't quite understand why until recently. And I'm going to get emotional. I'll try to get through this, but for those who don't know, excuse me, my sister and brother-in-law are in ICUs battling COVID symptoms. Excuse me. And this community has done nothing but get behind me hard. I'm actually kind of blown away at how much the community's gotten behind us without hesitation. Matter of fact, I have people sitting in front of me who have been very supportive. Mayor Lee took me to get my first COVID shot. You know, I've had offers and received offers from people on the Commission for Gas Cards. Casey, we healed because of this. And it's been insane, but nothing short of insane. Insane's not even the correct word to describe what me and my family have dealt with for the last month, but this community has gotten behind me in a way I can't even put into words. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's done that. It reminds me why I've been up here for 2 years, over 2 years, trying to fight for the betterment of this town. It's worth it. And I hope if you aren't registered to vote, you'll come down and you'll just feel what I felt from this community over the last 30 days. And even before that, you know, when I started this page 2 years ago, Watch Pickwick, for those who might not know, it was overwhelming this whole thing since I started Watch Pickwick has been nothing but overwhelming, but even more so, a different kind of overwhelming in the last month. It's been nothing but love and caring, and this town is worth it. And I know we have our differences. Every community on planet Earth has their differences, but we can get through it. We can get through it. We have to get through it together. And regardless, I'm just going to say it. I've been an atheist for as long as I can remember, and I've seen God in the last month, and I've got proof. And that's neither here or there. But people can change based on circumstance. This community can change if we all came together. It doesn't change the fact that 40% of this town is not registered to vote, whatever I sit here and say, whatever you guys say. The only thing that's going to change that, and the only way we get back on track as a whole, is if we all get involved. And this last election, what was it, 8% of the people in town voted?
Yep.
And I posted something about that. I think it was, a couple hundred people?
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. The amount of people that said they weren't even aware that there was an election, even though it was only one item. They weren't even aware of it, was staggering to me. And the information's out there. Everyone in this building knew about it. You know, the only way to change your community is to get involved. And it kind of goes back to what Mr. Hamilton was saying too. North and South becoming one. Our differences coming together, figuring out what separates us. That's the only way to do this. And I truly believe events like the Be the Change voter drive is the way to go. And hopefully this is just part one of that. But I hope everybody joins us. I want to thank all the ladies that are involved in this, all the businesses that are involved in this. There's way too many people to mention. There's a lot of people that put a lot of hard work, a lot of time, a lot of money, who've saved me because the last month I've been MIA. But they've picked up the ball and ran with it. It's going to be a really fun time. I have the chance to use my DJing skills a little bit too while I'll be out there, so that'll be fun. And
Can't wait. I cannot
it's going to be
wait.
a great time, and I hope to see everybody there. Thanks, guys.
We'll look forward to it. I'm looking
Jay.
forward to it. I'll be there. So, anybody else would like to speak? Any other citizens? All right, then. How about next we do the city manager's report?
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor. This evening, we have Cynthia Hotsapples. She's going to give us a presentation on some financial questions that you had asked, and we'll start from there. Thank you.
All right. We wanted to ask a few questions. I'm going to start. Do you have a few that you wanted to ask?
Sorry, I didn't have all of it.
Yeah, it's
Clear
all
prayer.
right.
I was waiting for the presentation first.
Yes. Do you want
Sure, we can move for, we'll move to the presentation and then we can take questions after.
Sure.
If that's okay? Okay. Good evening. There are several operations of the city, and the two major types include proprietary, which are business enterprise. Those include the enterprise utilities and recreation, and these operate like a business. In the governmental area, those are tax supported, and those include general area and streets. The enterprise funds include major, which are utilities, power, water, wastewater, refuse or sanitation, and stormwater. In the minor area, we have recreational, which includes golf and pool. In the general fund is those departments that are fully funded by the general fund include the city commission, police, fire, health, planning and zoning, general government, income tax, parks and rec, and others. Those that are partially funded by the general fund, and what I mean by that is the city of Piqua does not have two operations in certain areas. They don't have a city manager over just the utilities and then a different CEO over the governmental. So some of the areas such as city building, city manager, engineering, law, finance, purchasing, and human resources, a portion of the expenses for those departments are allocated out into the enterprise areas. So it's kind of a shared group of departments. And then the general fund also is able to offer certain transfer support to various areas. The enterprise, the revenues in the enterprise area are basically derived from self-supporting things like utility fee for services, also penalties and late fees, and occasionally there'll be user-driven special fees such as hookup fees or change-out fees or things like that. Expenses for this presentation in the enterprise areas include operations and maintenance, labor and benefits, and purchase power. And by far, purchase power is the largest expenditure in the enterprise areas. The general fund revenues are mainly tax supported, and those include income tax, which is the largest area of support, local and state taxes, as well as property taxes. There are some limited fees within certain departments such as health, planning and zoning, and areas like police and fire. The expenditures include equipment or capital, operations and materials, and then labor and benefits. So if we look at 2020 overall, as far as the operations of this city, we spent around $62.2 million. $44.2 million were in the enterprise funds, $4.1 million in street maintenance and street income tax, $12 million in the general fund areas, which included general government, parks, police, fire, health, planning, and plaza, and $1.9 million regarding community planning and development. And to qualify that $9.1 million, that's basically what was received in CARES funding throughout all of the departments. And those things were used for things like PPP, things like protective equipment, designing areas so that the employees would be safe, the public would be safe, as well as about $400,000 was used in helping offset police expenditures, and $1.4 million was used in offsetting fire expenditures. If we, whoops, one too far, sorry.
So do we know on $62.2 million in expenses, what was our overall revenue then in comparison?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Through each individual fund, we go through that. So if we look at the 2020 overview, as you can see, purchase power is the largest at 22.1, or 36% of the overall budget. O&M is 31% at $19.3 million. Labor and benefits is 18.3 at 29, and then non-enterprise capital is about 2.3 million or 4%, and transfers about 200,000. So in taking out the purchase power to get a little more perspective of what would be O&M, that was 19.3 million or 48%, and then labor and benefits came in just under that at 46%. The annual funding in terms of staffing was for approximately 192 full-time employees. In the utilities area and support of utilities, there were 80. Police had around 40. fire 35, administrative department 17, streets about 14 and a half, and parks and golf about 5.5 full-time. If we go to look more specifically at the enterprise funds, sanitation had revenue of about $2.2 million and expense of $1.9 million. Those expenses were distributed with labor and benefits at about $700,000 or 37%, and O&M of $1.2 million or 63%. If you look at the 5-year revenue and expense between the years of 2016 and 2020, you can see that the revenue increases incrementally and the expense ends up lower in 2016, increments up, especially throughout 18 and 19. And if you remember, 18 and 19 were when we were providing containers throughout the city, sanitary containers. And so you see those go up in those timeframes and then back down in 2020. If you look at the unrestricted fund balances at the bottom over a 5-year period, they were depleting slightly from 1.1 or 2 million down to 900,000 as the containers are being distributed and the expense gone up. And then in 2020, because all of the departments were looking at containing costs throughout the COVID timeframe, it went back up to about 1.3 million in unrestricted fund balance.
Do you know it's capital purchases included in the O&M?
No, capital purchases, the format that we used for this presentation was based on the audited financial statements or the CAFR information. And the enterprise funds, as far as capital, that's not an expense. That's an investment in an asset. And so over time, that's depreciated. And so the depreciation expense is what's shown within the enterprise budgets. Next to the electric fund, the revenues were $27.8 million and expenses were $29.2. Once again, the largest of that at 76% was purchased power. Labor and benefits were 2.6 or 9% of the budget, and O&M was $4.5 million or 15%. If you would pull out the purchase power and just look at labor and benefits, that was approximately 37%, and O&M were 63% for a different look at the distribution. The 5-year revenue and expense trend, as you can see throughout, purchase power is the largest amount, and O&M ebbs and flows according to what projects power has going on. And then labor and benefits are pretty consistent throughout that time. The unrestricted fund balance in power went from a high of $7.9 million in 16 down to $3 million in 2020. And I'll qualify that by saying that during that time period, there was a change in the pension liability accounting. And so based on the number of employees that are within the electric unit, that had an impact on it. So each year that can fluctuate. And so that's why you saw the distinction between the 7.9 and the 3 from that, and also from other liabilities that they may have had during that time.
Can I ask, that's a pretty significant loss. And then looking at it year over year, if that would continue each year, is there a plan set forth for 3.9 to 3? I mean, what is that, a $1.3 million loss? I mean, if that continues each year.
3.9 to 3 is 900,000.
Each year, each department looks at what their projected revenues are and then plans their projects around that. Currently, if you look at where we are in the electric fund, I think part of their purpose was to reduce certain balances as projects were completed. And I think Mr. Krieger said throughout that they're now coming to a time within their planned projects where a lot of the substations have been refurbished and some of the projects will now decrease. So I would hope that based on balancing revenues and expenses that we would see that increase over the next few sessions.
And then, Can you help me understand, just, I'm not fully aware, so up there, revenue versus expense, yeah, it's 1.4 million loss. From 2019 to 2020, it dropped from 3.9 to 3. There's a difference there, so is that next year, 2021? Where does that add up? I see a difference of 0.9 versus 1.4. Am I understanding that correct?
Well, there are two different things that we're looking at. The revenue and expenses are based on certain criteria. The fund balance can change based on other things than just revenue expense. It could be change in assets, change in liabilities, change in which part of their fund balance. All of the fund balances that the departments have or the funds have are more extensive than just the unrestricted. They have restricted fund balances too that will take care of some of those liabilities, but a liability can change from year to year, either increasing or decreasing, which can have an effect on the restricted or unrestricted fund balances. So it's not just the revenue and expense gap.
Okay.
So how do we allow one of our enterprises, just by looking at the graph here, just so people can get an understanding of this? Because when you look at this, revenue, vice, expense, we're operating in the red because there's not enough revenue there to balance out that budget. So when you look at this from a perspective of somebody sitting out in the audience or somebody that's looking at that, it shows them that we're operating in the red. But as a city commission, we continue to sign off on projects that come out of this budget. Where does that differ? Where is that in part of that restricted fund that is not on here?
That may be part of that restricted fund, but you also have to consider that as part of the expense in the area of the enterprise funds is depreciation. And while that's an expense, it's a non-cash item. It's where you expense over time capital projects. So you could have a larger cash balance and be able to approve certain funding levels in the future because of those type of things, because you'll be replacing that asset with another asset that will last longer and be a critical part of your operation. That's not to say that you shouldn't also consider how long those items can replace each other and be cognizant that if you're seeing trends go up in areas while revenue is not stable or where you perhaps haven't had increases for a long period of time, that you also need to consider, are there other areas where costs can be contained, be it labor, benefits, project delays, things like that. So it's kind of a mixture of all of the above, and as departments put their budgets together, they look at those type of things as well as we look at forecasts and cash flows to see if what they're proposing they can do. So next up is the water fund, and the revenue in the water fund last year was 7.5 million. The expenses were 7.1 million. Labor is approximately 1.8 million, or 25% of their expense, and O&M is 5.3 million, or 75% of their expense. The revenue in water is incrementally increasing. Those are based on the rates that were put in place a period ago. And then the expenditures, for a period of time, the revenues were outpacing those, but then once the water plant and several other water projects, such as the pipeline and the tower, the debt service on those are now in place, your revenues and expenditures are averaging out. So the 6.2 million that you have in place as far as your unrestricted fund balance, that needs to be maintained for your debt service, because annually your debt service is about 2.6 million a year, and then those that that have loaned funds also look at you maintaining a certain level to be able to anticipate the next year's debt service, as well as I know water has things well in place above the ground, but below the ground, there are some challenges for years to come in terms of replacement of water lines throughout the city. So we'll want to maintain a healthy balance in those fund balances. In the wastewater area, we had $6.8 million in revenue and $4.2 million expense. The labor was approximately $1.5 million, or 36%. O&M was $2.7 million, or 64% of their budget. This is what water was undertaking before. Wastewater is now doing. They're building up their revenues in anticipation of their debt service. We're anticipating that the wastewater project will be completed later on this year, if not into early next year. And with that, we'll have about a $2.7 million in debt service. So the balances that you're seeing at the $7.2 million level also are there to maintain the debt service in the future, 1 year ahead, and also be able to pay the debt in the current year. So those are levels that we'd like to maintain, as well as under our wastewater also has some under the ground issues with piping and those type of things that will need to be addressed soon too. On to stormwater, that's the smallest of our utility funds. And in stormwater, the revenue is $1.2 million, expense was $1.1 million. The O&M was 55% at $600,000, labor and benefits 45% at $500,000. And the revenue in the stormwater has been level for the past several years at about 1.1 to 1.2. They are able to do some major projects periodically based on receiving capital and or operating grants. In the years 2017 and 2019, they received a $200,000 to a $340,000 grant. So what you're seeing with their unrestricted fund balances during those grant periods or the year following, you'll see an increase in expenses, and that's using those funds along with the city's funds, leveraging city funds to complete the projects.
Okay, so between the water, wastewater, and stormwater, it sounds like a lot of them are connected with each other. You said like the undergrounds all need repair. Is that money pulled from one in particular, or is it through all three? How's that work between the three different funds?
The city currently has a separate water and wastewater system. So as far as the infrastructure underground, they would each be maintaining their own systems underground. The underground department supports all three. And so when you look at staffing in those areas, they're allocated to all three of those areas. Stormwater is above ground and infiltrates through the storm system.
Thanks.
So in regards to just say the water fund, wastewater, and stormwater, the rate increases that happened, I want to say we just finished up the last rate increase.
Yes.
With that increase, are we going to be able to sustain these numbers that we're looking at for the unrestricted fund balance that we're talking about? Or are we going to be seeing these enterprises come back to us and saying, hey, we need to possibly do another rate increase?
There's the potential that will happen. Right now, we're projecting that maybe a year or two we'll be able to sustain these balances. But then after that, we'll have to look at what projects and the priority of the projects. Both water and wastewater are controlled or regulated by the EPA. So a lot of that depends on what requirements they have of the city and those operations. Okay, in the area of the street funds, which is also under the general funds area, there are two major funds there. The Street 103 Fund, which is the street levy fund for street construction. The revenues for 2020 were $2.6 million, and the expenditures were $1.8 million. The O&M was approximately $1 million, or 56% of the budget, and the capital was $800,000, or 44%. The 5-year revenue and expense summary, the majority of the revenue comes from income tax, and then we leverage those income tax dollars to acquire through generally a competitive process, both federal and state grants. And as you can see, that fluctuates from a mere 100,000 on up to, in 2020, over $1 million in a capital grant. Those fund balances that you see from $3 million to $5.1 million, they fluctuate according to what project is in place and the amount of city dollars that have to be leveraged or matched to those federal and state dollars. And as we build that fund up, it's typically for future projects because that fund typically is out a 3 or 5 year period in which we have to apply for the funds and then determine that if we are awarded them, that we will commit the city funds to those endeavors. In addition, there's the Street 101 fund, and that's basically the street maintenance fund within the city. And the revenues there are $3.2 million, and expenditures were $2.3 million. As with other funds, we were hoping to spend more in those areas, but because, at least in 2020, but because of COVID, we had to tap down some of the projects, and they are currently under consideration for next year's budget. The labor and benefits in that fund at $1.1 million are 48% of the expenditures. O&M was 0.8 at 35%, and capital was about $400,000, and that was at 17%. The revenues in the street come from basically income tax, and then also from state tax, and that includes the licensing and then a state-funded from their various taxes that the state collects. The fund balance and the restricted fund balance, it ranged from $2.8 million throughout that 5-year period and ended last year at $3.8. And once again, we were anticipating it to be more in line with about the 2.8, but we're unable to complete some of the projects. In our recreation funds under the general fund area, we have the Parks Fund, and the revenue there was about $400,000. And then we transferred $50,000, and then the expenditures were about $600,000, and they were equally split between labor and benefits and O&M. And as you can see, they range, if you look at the 5-year revenue and expense area, they range from the income tax being relatively level, and then the capital and projects are dependent on what's available or what's requested by the department and approved by the commission in terms of the transfer. In terms of the 2019 transfer being larger, that was anticipation of projects to complete in 2020, and they were put on hold, so it's still there and available within the overall general fund budget, and it will be prioritized and back before you during the 2021 budget in terms of whether you would like to approve those projects again.
So the Parks is an enterprise fund
No, Parks is under the general
under
fund.
the general. Pool as well.
Pool is an enterprise.
Okay.
Pool is a minor enterprise fund,
Yes. Okay.
okay?
And if I'm understanding that correct, that's why there's no fund balance, it's just
Yeah,
strictly,
Right,
General.
because they
Over as
roll
needed.
into the general fund balance. And then the golf fund, the revenue was $580,000, which was about $100,000 more than in the previous 2019 year. We transferred $150,000 in anticipation of some capital or equipment purchases, and the expense was $700,000. It was split, $250,000 were labor and benefits, or 36%, and $450,000 were O&M. And that was up slightly because of some of the COVID, the anticipation wasn't that the golf would be able to do 100 more thousand, but because of COVID and the ability for golfers to be outside and anticipate that, we had some more expenses because we had to do some COVID-related type things. But fortunately, it was one of the things, and we're also fortunately seeing some of that returning. We've had a good spring so far, and we've had an increase in the number of golfers that have done memberships in certain areas. And we have a younger group of golfers that are golfing, so we're hoping that that will continue.
So is that, when you talked about how to put in practices in place for COVID and restrictions, originally you said under the community planning development, that kind of came out of that CARES Act, there's about 100,000 that went to PPE type things. Is that what you're talking about there, some of those extra expenses?
Some of those type of things, some of the ways in which they played, like there may not have been flags in the holes, some of the outings had to be redistributed as far as times, so they were unable to use the course as frequently. We had to extend, the tee times, those type of things. So there were more labor intense type things, so that's why some of our labor went up during those times.
And then did you explain, I kind of misheard on there, so it looks like we transferred over 150,000, which would have been an extra 30,000 compared to expenses. What was that used for?
It was used for some of the capital. We purchased some capital.
Okay,
And
but
also
that-
to offset the golf cart.
All right, and then the capital don't show on here?
Right. Okay, next up is the general fund areas. And let's, first go through some of the major general fund revenues. And this shows that by far municipal income tax is our largest general fund revenue. And if you look at it from the right side to the left, in 2016, why you kind of saw an uptick during that time was 2015 was the first year in which we went from 1.75 to the current 2% rate. And because some of the employers and some of the withholders didn't click in to making that jump as quickly, we saw some more people that were actually paying their 15 taxes in 16 when they filed their return. So that's why you see a slight drop in about 6.41% in 17, then it kind of levels off and increases incrementally at between 2 and 2.8% throughout 18, 19, and 20. The property taxes that we receive throughout the general fund areas are about 1.2 to 1.4 a year, and then the local government funds, which used to be in the area of $1 million or slightly over $1 million, have dropped to the $400,000 to $500,000 level. So from 16, we had revenues in the primary areas of about 13 million, and as you can see, it dropped down throughout 17, 18, and 19, and was back up in 2020 to about a 13.2 million level. The general fund areas had overall revenue of 14.2 million and expenses of 12 million. The largest of that area was police at 4.7 million or 39%, fire at 4 million or 33%, general admin at 1.4 million or 12%, then general government 400,000 at 3%, health at 500,000 at 4%, parks about 600,000 at 5%, plaza 2% at 200,000, and non-safety transfers of 200,000. The unrestricted 5-year fund balance ranged from a low of 5.4 million, and then we gained ground last year at 8.2 million. And basically the 8.2 million gain, the majority of that was the CARES Act and the COVID relief that was received by various departments, including not only police and fire, but also health and some of the other areas. The fire department being one of the primary.
Good.
Sorry, real quick.
I'm sorry.
So you said a lot of the money comes for the increase in the unrestricted funds from the CARES Act, but we also talked about that money being applied to police and fire, correct?
Right, and how
Is that
that,
for salary?
it was for salary and benefits, but what that does is the amount that you're seeing in terms of the 4.7 million and the 4 million in fire above, that doesn't include the COVID funds. In other words, the COVID funds were a reimbursable amount, so we were able to reduce both police and fire's budget by the 400,000 to police and the 1.4 million to fire. And so because it didn't have to be supported by the general fund, we didn't have to use general fund revenues for that. That's why you saw the increase. The expenses in the general fund area were originally proposed to be about $4 to $5 million more. And because we, of course, didn't receive the fire engine or fire ladder truck, that was $2 million. And then we were able to reduce both police and fire budgets, as well as the majority of the health department budget was reduced. And so we were able to increase our general fund area budget to use in future periods.
But that could be used for other things besides police and fire than the general fund, right?
The general fund budget supports all of the above in the next budget period.
So do we have, we were able to reduce their budgets, put that money into the general fund. Do we have the total expenses or what that total reduction was? Is that 400 and the?
Right. The 400,000 to the police area, the fire was 1.4 million. And then I don't have off the top of my head what each of the department reductions were, not being funded through COVID, but just reducing their overall budgets. So specifically in the area of fire, their labor and benefits at 2.7 were 67%. Their O&M at 600,000 was 15%, and then their capital, which they were able to purchase the fire engine at approximately 350,000, and the ambulance and medic at 277. And why we showed the capital in this was I wanted to make the point that those were both things that had been ordered prior to the COVID hitting. There is between a 9, 12, and now up to, we're finding 15 and 18 month lag time between certain purchases, especially for large vehicles like that. So those were all in the works in the previous budget period and were actually delivered in the early to mid part of 2020.
So are those replacement vehicles that are coming in to replace other vehicles that are currently in the fleet?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm gonna lead into a question. The fire truck that we just had repainted and re-decaled, is that part of this capital that's in here?
Yes. I'm pretty sure it's part of the 350. You mean the new vehicle that was just decaled or a previously
No,
owned
this was one of our older platforms that they had out at Lumpkins that was painted, and then we sent it away to get decals put on it.
That'll have to check. I'll check for you.
Thank you.
Okay, in the area of the police department, the revenue is 3.1 million, transferred was 1.4 million, and expense of 4.7 million. And their labor is 3.9 million, or 83%. O&M was 600,000, or 13%, and their capital was 200,000, which included 5 cruisers and 1 vehicle. And then that also included the fit-up costs for those, which happen outside of the actual manufacturing. Okay. And whoops.
We gotta go back.
Sorry. Just overall, the 2020 positives, we listed the economic and community support through the CARES Act. It's not only the CARES Act dollars that we received, but within the community, there was a significant number of stimulus dollars that citizens and businesses received, PPP for businesses, dollars to school district, which overall have a profoundly positive effect on the community and businesses. They were able to stabilize some of their workforce, keeping individuals that perhaps would have previously had to be laid off, which then allows for a more healthy and robust economy all throughout the city. We had an engaged and city workforce, and I'd like this opportunity to personally and publicly thank all of the employees at the City of Piqua for going above and beyond over the last 12 to 18 months. It's been phenomenal, the ways in which we've had to work together, and the dedication throughout the whole entire city is so thanked. And then we live in an environment currently in the city and as well as in Ohio, where we had significantly low inflation and a lower cost of living. Whether that goes to 21 and beyond, I'm not sure. The long-term effects of the COVID will not be known for a while. We typically lag 12 to 18 to 24 months. So while we're coming out of it well currently, cross your fingers, I hope it continues that way. We, however, in certain areas have kind of a stagnant revenue base, and so we'll have to see what, if anything, we can do to help promote an increase in those areas. Certain areas, fuel and some of the other commodities that are governmental oriented, we're seeing some higher inflation. Hopefully it will be temporary, but we'll just have to keep a watch, particularly going into next budget year. And then we're also seeing scarcity of certain products and materials, and so we're indicating to some of the departments that they need to have larger inventories on hand because we're expecting longer lead times to receive those products. So with that, I can entertain any other questions you might have. If not, I'd like to thank you for all of your support throughout this time and always.
Any other questions?
I had one, because on that, some of our financial statements that we'll get, like, so safety, the street, parks, safety that's all fire, police, all rolled under one, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then same, like, we had parks, so the pool's all in there. What all else is included in the parks?
Parks does not include the pool.
It does
Pool
not?
is separate. Parks is like recreation, the playgrounds, the Pittsburgher Park, things like that. It's the maintenance of the fields and of the labor that goes in with the mowing and the keeping and maintenance of those areas, the bike path.
Okay,
Like
so
that.
pool its own separate fund then? Okay, because I didn't see it on there, and
At all.
I know our one financial statement showed that we had a loss of 50,000 with the pool. Is that for like the consultants that we had brought in?
A
to take a
portion of it is the consultants. Another portion of it was the utilities. Certain areas of the pool still have to be maintained. And then I think a small portion of it was depreciation of the capital assets. And then there may have also been some just general areas like there would be an allocation to it for insurance and insuring things like that. So that type of thing.
So general fund wise, like looking at the golf course, and I'll probably be the unpopular one because I don't play golf, so I'm trying to get an understanding of it, where we have a lagging park system that a majority of our families can benefit from on a day-to-day basis, where I would say a majority can't benefit from the golf course, whether they don't play or can't afford to play. Why do we have historically over the past 5 years, 4 years, have a tremendous amount of general fund transfers that go there when, for me personally, and I guess it's kind of a personal thing, that I would like to see more of those general fund transfers be going to our parks to better them park areas where we're going to make a bigger impact. So, and I know that's kind of a broad question, but why do we focus so much of the general fund transfer out to the golf course?
In part, in the previous years, there was an obligation that the transfer needed to be made because of the debt service on the course. It was expanded several years ago in the 1990s from a 9-hole course to a 18-hole course. And during that time when that obligation was undertaken, it was under a GO bonding, and so the commission had an obligation each year to meet that obligation.
When did debt service end on that, though?
The debt service ended in 18 or early 19. And so for a large period of time, because of that, there was delayed capital. We didn't put, where a mower useful life may be 5 to 7 years. I mean, we were stretching it 10, 12, 15 years. And so what we're doing right now is somewhat playing catch up with some of the capital, and that's the majority of what the transfer goes towards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then I think this last year, we had 150,000 in transfer, and you said there was an extra 30 on there towards capital. So is there also a part of that, that 150, is that additional? Like, do we know how much capital we spent for the golf fund this past year?
I don't know that off the top. I can get that information to you.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you for the update. I want citizens to be aware of where their tax dollars are going and how they're being spent. And we want to be as transparent as possible as to the state of the city and the condition of our finances. With that said, did you have anything else for the city manager's report?
Yes, Mayor, I had a few more items to note. June 2nd, the park board meeting will take place at 6 p.m. and some of the topics of discussion will be the pool feasibility study feedback from Brand Sutter Carroll. There'll be discussions about the tennis court rehab at Fountain Park, future plans for the dilapidated playground equipment at Armory Park, future removal of old pickleball court at Moat, and building rentals for Moat and Fountain Dining Hall. So if anybody's interested, that meeting starts at 6 p.m.
6.
In addition, on Thursday, June 3rd, from 4 to 6 p.m., there'll be a Main Street corridor upgrade discussion with a consultant at the Ulysses S. Grant Room at Fort Piqua Plaza. I would encourage everybody to attend that as well. It should be very informational. And then also, too, the June Planning Commission meeting has been canceled, so be advised of that. And lastly, we have the posting for the utilities billing office manager is up until June 18th, so I would encourage anybody with the proper qualifications to apply, please. Thank you.
All right. With that said, we will entertain commissioners' comments. We will start with Commissioner Foat.
Just want to say thank you to Cynthia for coming out and talking about the finances with us tonight. Greatly appreciate that. But to go on, we had a holiday weekend this past weekend, and I need to give a big shout out to our fire employees on the third shift. They had a house fire, I believe Monday, that we had mutual aid come in from Fletcher and Covington Fire. So thank you to those departments as well for coming out. Thank you to the third shift, or shift 3 Piqua Fire. And I had the luxury of being able to talk with our power employees on Saturday at about 12:47 a.m. until about 7:47 a.m. while they were out in front of my house replacing a power pole. So great thank you to them for responding out there and getting that replaced so my neighbors could get their electric turned back on. I had some very happy neighbors that we were able to get electric turned back on prior to holiday events happening for them. So those employees were Kyle Brandowy, Jordan Fesser, Hayden Hall, and Joel Hulskamp. So thank you guys for being out there and doing that work. And that is all I have for this evening.
Thank you very much.
Tomorrow evening is scheduled our open forum downtown at the gazebo at 7 p.m. The weather forecast doesn't look good. It looks like it's going to rain all day. So we'll take a look at it in the morning, and by noon we'll get a post out to everyone whether or not it's canceled. If it's raining, we're canceling. A big thank you for all the donations to the Tillman family who lost everything from the fire on Roosevelt. And also thank you to our hero firefighters. Another reminder that the grass continues to grow. Please get out and mow your lawns, pick up your trash, and pull your weeds. That's all I had.
That's good stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner Pearson. Commissioner Gerson.
Thanks. Thank you, Cindy, for providing some of those details. I know that's something, as you said, looking into the future, looking at our finances, where are we going to be, how are things going to be impacted? There's still a lot of unknowns, but that's why I think it's important to be transparent with them, opening up, seeing and asking those questions. I know we're going to be watching them closely, taking a look at where we're spending our money, how we can best keep us progressing, even though there may be some challenges ahead, but make sure as a city and a community, we're doing what we can to, keep everything moving forward. So, thank you.
That's it?
That's it.
Commissioner Hines.
Just a few things. Congratulations to our high school graduates. We had quite a few graduation activities happening over the past couple weeks. So congratulations to all of our high school and college graduates
College,
as well.
yes.
It is that time of year, and a lot of exciting times for our citizens here in our community. Also, just a reminder, it's the time of year where we can get out even more so because the weather is nice. And as I always say, there is so much we can do right here in our own community, whether it is the bike path, whether it's the river. There are so many opportunities to get outside. So I encourage our citizens to get outside and enjoy the beautiful place that we live. Also, a reminder that our Salvation Army lunch program is starting back up for summer lunches, and they will be traveling around as they typically do at the different stops throughout the week. So I'm very thankful that we have that opportunity, and thankful for all those that volunteer to be part of that summer lunch program throughout our city. Along with that, soon the school will be also following behind the Salvation Lunch truck with their bookmobile, and so a wonderful way to offer books to kids in the summer to encourage them to read. I am a huge proponent of our kids reading, and I'm excited that they are able to bring them to their locations in the city, and the kids can get books that way. So I encourage our citizens and our younger citizens to look out for those free meals and those books as well. So that is all I have.
All right. For my mayor's report, I just want to thank Cindy again for updating the commission on the city's finances and the citizens. You said well that the city workers work very hard and have gone through this pandemic admirably and resiliently, and they've worked very hard. And people will notice that tonight we're not wearing masks. Well, as of close of business today, we reverted back to pre-pandemic standards, and so there's no need for masks, and the governor's mandates go in place tomorrow. So we as a city decided that we're going back to the pre-pandemic guidelines. So that's why we don't have a mask, if anybody was curious. I'd like to thank everybody who was involved in the Memorial Day parade. I got to sit in a 2019 Mustang, and I saw so many people that I hadn't seen because of the pandemic and because of the situation. It was just nice to get out, to wave to people, to talk to people, to say hi. It was amazing. And it was a time to remember, and it still is a time to remember the fallen soldiers, especially from this area as well. And it was just good to get out and have people thank God that we're able to be here and do the things that we do because of the sacrifice of those who have fallen. So it was good to see everybody yesterday. I also would like to congratulate all the high school graduates from Piqua High School and from Lehman. Looking for good things from you guys in the future. Piqua City Schools does a good production. I watched the graduation on Channel 5. I was quite impressed. So keep up the good work, and I also said, let's remember today, June 1st, was the Tulsa Massacre that happened 100 years ago. So keep that in your memory as well. And with the community diversity or diversity committee on diversity beginning their much needed work, things like that have to be in our forefront of our minds, so that we're mindful that history does play a role in how we're going to proceed in the future. So let's remember, and let's proceed, and let's do it together. So that's all I have. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.